It's nice to finally have an answer and know who the coordinators are going to be on both sides of the football.
And not only that, but the answer is at least interesting, intriguing, and could be exciting.
Dan Quinn wants to do tough S with good people. He's got a couple of good ones here. It's going to be exciting this season.
Hail to the Commanders. It's the Commanders Squad. Everything Washington Commanders every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of the nation's capital. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Rally the burgundy and gold. The Commanders Squad Show starts now.
Anthony Armstrong, we got David Harrison, we got me, Nick Ashew here, as we now finally know we've got an offensive coordinator, we've got a defensive coordinator. Daronte Jones will be leading a defense that needs a lot of help and a lot of work and really just a complete rebuild at this point. But there's something to be said for after all the times we've done this podcast, guys, and we've all got our other various platforms that we're on as well. And the conversation so much has been about who is it going to be. The offensive coordinator with David Blau went really, really fast. Now we at least know who the defensive coordinator is going to be, which means, and something we're going to look at today as well, a lot of guys out there that are going to need to help this defense, both in the draft and specifically free agency, David. But here we are.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first answer, right? And there's still more answers to come. I would anticipate some changes on the coaching staff, especially on the defensive side. I think the offensive side, I'm not going to say that it's set, locked in or whatever, but I think the moves that would have been made likely would have been made by now. David Blau has been in that seat long enough that stuff probably would have been figured out. But I think on the defensive side of the ball, you've got, at least the potential of a couple of assistant coaches switching out. Jason Simmons is interviewing for the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive coordinator job. So he may, get that job and reunite with Mike McCarthy, which would obviously open up a position. But Anthony, that's even if Daronte wants a defensive pass game coordinator, like he may not want that, right? It's a growing position in the NFL, but it's not necessarily one that every team has. So I think it'll also be interesting now that we have the answer of who the DC is, who he brings in is also going to tell us some things.
No, you're talking about coaches and player-wise. On the coaching side, that's always interesting because there's a little bit of like who do you have a connection with? There's maybe that he had an assistant that he started to entrust in his preparation for games and things of that nature, and you like to keep somebody like that in the fold. So that's something to really pay attention to. Who comes around on the coaching side of things. My side is the free agency side, right? I've mentioned Jeff Okudah was a guy who, not a big name, former first round pick, plays the cornerback position, hadn't really jumped off the film with a lot of stats. But, when you've seen Adam Peters roll the dice on players with prove it deals, 1 year options, this is where this hire makes sense to me. Maybe you bring this guy in to kind of compete. He already knows what the tempo is supposed to look like. And frankly, that's what every coach does. They like to get some of their own guys in there. They want to make sure that they're there to start to impart the culture. And Daronte may do that with somebody like Okudah.
Get him, sick him. I love it. He's
bringing a dog mentality too. That's what I think
Daronte's
bringing.
Yeah. There you go. Listen, whatever works for this defense, we'll take it, right? I was texting back and forth with somebody that covers the Vikings, and I was asking him about Daronte Jones because there's only so much that we're going to know. Obviously, he's a first-time defensive coordinator, and the one negative that he did have to say, and I don't know if it's a negative as much as it's more of just something to keep an eye on, because I don't know how much of this falls just on him, but given what his role was with the Vikings, was that one of the criticisms was a lot of the young corners they drafted, pretty much all of them were cut after a couple of seasons. So, Washington obviously has some young corners, David, that they're going to be needing development with. They're going to need to grow. Now, that doesn't mean that Daronte Jones can't do it. It just means that the guys that they drafted and the coaching staff that was there together, it did not work out with a lot of those anywhere from first, second, third, or fourth round picks that they had in Minnesota.
Yeah, and that's where, the evaluation process is obviously going to come in. And the coaches are obviously always going to take the brunt of that type of stuff. That's where the front office comes in, the scouting department comes in, right? Like, what type of players do we need? And what I really love about hearing Adam Peters talk about the process that they go through, whether it be free agency or the NFL draft, it is one that's not, again, it's not necessarily unique to just Adam Peters or the Washington Commanders, but it's one that doesn't get talked about maybe near as much, and certainly isn't, everywhere, is that the front office and the scouts include the coaches in those evaluation processes. They hand you a stack of scouting reports, or I was going to say a CD-ROM or whatever of tape. It's probably just links to a Google Drive or something. I don't know how they do it inside the Commanders building, but you get a bunch of tape to watch, and you get a bunch of reports to read, and things like that, and then you get to give the feedback to the scout of like, hey, like this guy's not rangy enough, this guy's not dog enough, this guy's not whatever enough, or like this is like, hey, this prospect that you gave me, like when you show me the tape of Anthony Armstrong, cornerback, Texas Tech, like I see the length, I see the athleticism, and I see the aggression to go after the football, but the intelligence to know when to do it. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So now as a scout, now as a GM, an assistant GM, director of pro player, like whatever it is that I'm doing, I know what my coach and what my coordinator wants. And the clarity in that, I think, is the biggest thing. So when you look at somebody coming from working under a guy like Brian Flores, Brian Flores, there's a lot of conversations about Brian Flores, but one conversation that's not being had is that he beats around the bush, right? Like this man will tell you what he thinks, what he knows, and what he wants to know. So, Daronte Jones, that similar type of coach, then that equips Adam Peters with the information he needs to go find the right players. And even that, Anthony, I mean, you can have all the athletic traits, you can have all the tools and all that stuff, but this game is largely mental. And can you stand up to the NFL pressure, to making all the money, to getting all the accolades, to having all of the comments in social media about you? And then can you adapt to the system? Because a lot of people don't talk about this, but cornerback, I mean, maybe the second hardest position to go from college ball to the pro game.
And then if you go and think about the scheme you're in, if Brian Flores is more aggressive, that means the ball is coming out quick. And if you miss that tackle, a lot of cornerbacks, whenever it's game day, they play totally different. They'll be aggressive as hell when there's no cameras at practice. Oh, yeah, they'll jump all your routes then. Matter of fact, I'll tell you a quick story. I knew a guy, I won't say his name, but it was down there in Miami, and you would get the script a little bit ahead of time. And frankly, when we would do the walkthrough, they wouldn't change it, Nick. Same exact plays when it would come to practice. Can I tell you, this dude looked like an all-pro for this 1 week, and it did enough of a job that he started. And I tell you, he got whooped on that first drive. He gave up a touchdown, and the coach said, come on over here and sit by me. That's neither here nor there. But going back to the Minnesota Vikings and the draft picks, they haven't even drafted a highly drafted cornerback in Minnesota. I had to go over there and look. The highest was back in 2022. It was in the second round. Other than that, Kyrie Jackson comes to mind. He was a fourth rounder in 2024. Mekhi Blackman, Jay Ward, third and fourth rounders. So they haven't picked, top draft picks. Frankly, Washington has picked a highly drafted cornerback and then got rid of him most recently. So we can't go and try to look at somebody's one bad trait and say, oh, he's directly responsible for that. He may not be picking the players. You know what I'm saying? And he's like, I got to coach him. Go ahead, Dave.
Correct me if I'm wrong, too. I believe, because, unfortunately, Kyrie Jackson was killed in his rookie season, and I believe he was doing pretty well at I vaguely remember hearing that he was doing pretty well for himself, before, unfortunately, he was killed. So, obviously we don't know what would have happened, and that's tragic in and of itself. But like you said, Anthony, like how many swings have you really taken? But then also, how much time has there been really had and available to make sure these players get up to speed as well?
Yeah, a lot of times, and appreciate you pointing that out too. Rest his soul, but you can't. I've seen like somebody was like, oh, Daronte was at LSU for 1 year and it was horrible down there, and it was like. It was 1 year. Sometimes people have to go through those things, right? Like if you always have somebody that's always on the ascension, there's going to be a fall at some point, right? There's going to be some sort of backtrack at some point. And if you're like, man, this is the wonder kid, he's just always winning, it's going to hit at some point. And then at that point, what are you going to do? Are you going to ride through those storms? Or are you going to lean on somebody who's actually had some rough points? They say, hey, what happened in LSU? Man, let me tell you what I learned from that situation. I learned X, Y, and Z. I can't do these things. I didn't have the level of talent to match the pass rush. So that right there is much more valuable than somebody that's always holding up a tournament trophy medal each and every week, right? Your kid ain't good because he always wins tournaments. That's my message. Just because they always win, it don't mean they're the best. Sometimes they had to go through some stuff to actually build that experience that's going to bring more value to your team, Nick.
Yeah, listen, everybody's got to deal with adversity at some point.
The LSU thing too. So this is something that I've seen being discussed as well. And yeah, like they were like 40th in the nation in points allowed. And, I got LSU, SEC, like that's not good enough, right? We got, but also understand that's 40 out of like 185 or something crazy. Like that's not like 40 out of 45. You know what I'm saying? It's not like you're ranked 31 out of 32. And also, and I don't want to get too deep into the LSU 2021, dialogue, but like both of his starting corners were gone for the rest of that. Like they lost both their starting corners is the way I mean to say that. So they shifted, and this is the part I love about the 2020-21 LSU situation is because of the struggle they were going through on defense, some of it health related, some of it personnel related. Daronte Jones, first-year defensive coordinator, first-year defensive play caller in SEC land, what he did is he switched his defense. He switched from the original defense they were going to run that year, and then when everything started happening, they moved to a 4-2-5, bend, don't break. Try not to give up the big play, force the offense to move down the field. Maybe they'll make a mistake we can capitalize on. Why? Because he identified his personnel. He says, listen, this is who we are. This is who we got to be right now. It's not the go-to-the-mat, knife fight type of team we wanted to be, but it's going to give us the best chance to possibly be successful. And they ran into some teams that could do a lot of different things. You look at the game, they got their butts whooped by the Kentucky Wildcats in 2021, and hat tip to Chris Rodriguez, 16 carries, 140-something yards, a touchdown, a receiving touchdown for a back that everybody says can't catch the ball. Chris Rodriguez went off in that game, but the Kentucky Wildcats, I know I said I didn't want to go on this long thing, and now I'm going on this long thing, but the Kentucky Wildcats with Will Levis, Chris Rodriguez, and a couple of other people, Wan'Dale Robinson, who's in the NFL, a couple of other people, what they were able to do is they could ground and pound you. They had a slash and dash back that could complement Chris Rodriguez. Didn't really need him because of everything I just told you he did, but they had him. They had quick burst receivers. They had deep receivers. So when you're facing a defense that's very limited, we got to play bend, don't break. We can't do a whole lot of things creatively. That's exactly the type of offense you don't want to see, and that's what Kentucky had that year. And, oh, by the way, B.J. Ojulari played on that defense, ends up being the second-round pick in 2023 to the Arizona Cardinals. So obviously they were doing some things right process-wise. And like you said, Anthony, that's what I'm more worried about is what does the coach do when they face adversity? And what this coach did when he faced adversity is he said, let's find a new way to be as successful as we possibly can instead of let's stick to what we're doing and I'm just going to yell at all of y'all to do it better, which unfortunately we've seen that and that doesn't work. Thank you for coming through my TED Talk.
I think in the end here, no, well, first off, we have an hour, so you got plenty of time to say what you need to say. That's literally the whole point of this. But like, I'm going to say something that I will rarely say, but I'm going to say it here. We don't actually know. We don't actually know what he's going to be as a defensive coordinator. We can have all the opinions and get all the facts, and we don't know what the interview process was like. We don't know what was said in those interviews. We don't know what the philosophy is. We don't know what the free agent targets are necessarily going to be yet. But like, we truly don't know what type of defensive coordinator he's going to be until we actually see this defense built up and we actually see what this defense looks like. Look, the one thing I will say that it's certainly promising that gives you some semblance of hope, and I would assume gave the organization hope beyond the interviews and the specific details that were gone over, was that Daronte Jones has been in systems with defensive coordinators that are very, very good, that have had a lot of success over the years, and a Mike Zimmer, in a Vance Joseph, and obviously in a Brian Flores. Those are three names that are highly respected as defensive minds in the NFL. So some of it is being a part of that process. I know he's been in a bunch of different places, and there's something good about that, where in some ways he can take elements from different defensive schemes that might work and put it all together in his own thing. So sometimes there is a benefit to taking a little more time to grow and get better and build up whatever your skill set is, to where this is now his time. And maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago, it wasn't his time to be an NFL defensive coordinator, but now it is for Daronte Jones, David. And you look at this and say, yeah, we don't actually know what he's going to be like, but he has all of the intangibles, and he's got the resume, and he's gone through the school, if you will, that's helped build him up to this point where now he's ready to actually take over a defense.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about it. That's what makes me most excited about Daronte is the wealth of experience that he has. Even just working for Brian Flores, like people who wanted to detract from the wealth of experience would say, okay, but he spent the last 3 years with Brian Flores. I actually had a comment because I did a recent episode of Locked On Commanders where I only looked at the last 3 years. And they're like, yeah, but all the last 3 years were under Brian Flores. Okay. In 2023, the Brian Flores defense blitzed 49% of the time. In 2024, they blitzed 38% of the time. And then in 2025, that number was closer to 30% of the time. In 2023, they played a lot of heavy man coverage behind that really aggressive blitz package. 2024, they played with more 3 safety looks. 2025, they moved to 5-man fronts. So the Brian Flores defense is not a Brian Flores defense. That's what we're talking about with Daronte Jones, is he's coming from organizations and he's coming from defensive coordinators and he's coming from his own history at LSU that is all predicated on identifying who we have, what their talent is, and what we can make of it. A lot of people are not even talking about his experience with the Cincinnati Bengals. He's on the 2018 staff where that Cincinnati Bengals defense got torched. They end up cleaning house. They bring in a new staff. Lou Anarumo comes in, keeps Daronte on the staff, and they completely flip that defense on its head, going from a primarily two-shell defense with 20 or two high shell defense with 20% blitz rate to a single high defense, Anthony, with one of the most aggressive blitz rates. And the defensive roster that year had like a 20% turnover, which is not that much in the National Football League. So it's largely the exact same roster, and they had much more success. So Daronte, like I said, like what we know about Daronte is that his pedigree, his DNA is literally designed to shift based on what he's got. And it's made the evaluation really exciting for me because I'm a nerd. And like the episode I dropped today, I literally at the end of the episode go through and like with the roster as it is in 2026, looking at Daronte's history, here's what I think the defense looks like. And I'm excited because every move they make, every player they bring in, I'm gonna go back through his history and be like, all right, here's how the scheme might shift. And then Anthony, when we get to OTAs, he's going to roll out his defense. I'm going to go, oh, I didn't see that coming. That's going to be fun. So, I mean, that's what should get fans excited, because the fact that we don't know what he's going to do means that nobody else knows what he's going to do. So all this stuff of like, well, the Cowboys know the Commanders. They don't know these Commanders. The Eagles know the Commanders. They don't know these Commanders. And even the NFC North team, like who they play, the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings are going to come in this game like, well, they know Daronte. Guess what? They don't know this version of Daronte, because what Daronte has shown you is whenever the weather changes, whenever the tree changes that he's sitting in, he's going to change with it.
I love the fact that you mentioned in Cincinnati that he was a part of a staff that had a big leap up in success with a small amount of turnover, because I think that's something that's big to consider. Whenever you walk in, it's easy for somebody to say, I need to clean house and I need to bring in all my new guys. That's what the old historic thing is. It's something to say if somebody walks in and be like, you know what, you got good players so far. You have some good parts. But if we, do these things here, make a couple of key improvements at these spots, we can really bump the value. Hell, it sounds like me advising a listing, man. Like, listen to me whenever I'm helping you out sell your house. I'm like, hey, your house is fine. It's beautiful. You can sell it as is. But if you want to make a couple more bucks, hey, let's paint. Let's, update the fixtures, right? Let's get a little pass rush. We can actually make ourselves look better, and we can, roll out a hellified system. So I love the fact that he's going to likely just adjust to what you have right now and then see what works the best. Because another thing is frustrating as a player. And I remember from my 2010 season going into my 2011 season, everybody knew that I was fast and I was going to take the top off. So what did they do in the 2011 season? Matter of fact, I remember the game against the Patriots. When I touched the field, the whole defense for the Patriots was yelling 13, 13, and they would back the hell up. I should have ran 20 yards and stopped, but that wasn't called. You get what I'm saying? So instead of bumping my head into a wall and continuing to run into double coverage, even though Fred Davis had a hell of a season, I would have loved to have, some adjustments made to allow, some more plays happen and come my way. So I love to see Daronte having that in his history, Nick.
It's interesting because we are seeing more of that in the NFL, where I've talked for years about how we're getting the rebirth of the running back in the NFL. We are seeing teams lean a little more on the run because defenses are doing what they did against you to more teams now. As more teams were trying to look for those deep threats and look downfield, teams are saying, okay, no, we're going to force you to run, or we're going to give you, something 15 yards, 10 yards, 5 yards, as opposed to something 35 yards down the field. So the game is an evolution. It's a constant evolution. And I do think that Daronte Jones does have a real advantage, having been with so many different coordinators, to hopefully soak up the different things that worked and almost observing from afar. But, the real thing is now this matters. Now he is the defensive coordinator for a defense that needs a lot of work. And the Commanders now sit with an offensive coordinator who's a first-time coordinator, a defensive coordinator who's a first-time coordinator. That could pay off, but it's also a massive risk that they are taking, especially for somebody like Dan Quinn that's got a lot of pressure on him. We'll look at what that means next. It's Commander Squad.
Hey, it's Matt Derry from the Locked On Lions podcast. The people I love depend on me. If I'm gone, the financial responsibilities don't disappear. I didn't want my family figuring things out during the hardest moment of their lives. That's why I knew only one place to go. I chose life insurance through my friends at Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. I love the folks at Ethos. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get the free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Application times and rates may vary.
All right, Anthony Armstrong, David Harrison, Nick Ashew. Look, it can be a good thing, it can be a bad thing, but it is very much a topic of conversation around the fan base, the media, everybody, with the fact that you've got two first-time coordinators for a head coach and Dan Quinn that he's not I wouldn't put him on the hot seat. I'd say he's maybe like a little in the car, and you're going, okay, there's a little something going on here, but it's not much. Well, you know what this tells it? If you're Dan Quinn, and he obviously has a big part in this process, David, I think there's at least a level of, yeah, I'm comfortable having two first-time coordinators because the front office has at least told me we are building this thing and we're not putting you on the hot seat and putting that much pressure on you, in one season. Now, I'm reading into this. I recognize that, but I think there's something to be said for that, because if they were in win now mode and it was all about getting back to a 12, realistically, they're probably looking at this saying, we are going to take a little bit of a risk, but we like the potential for these coordinators. Let's make sure that that's the focus, as opposed to just going out and get veterans at the position because we're trying to just win now and make it all about the immediate versus the long term.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing to remember is that Josh Harris is not a new sports owner, right? Like, this isn't his first time owning a sports franchise. It's not his first time around the sun on this thing. One of his, principal advisors in this whole thing, Bob Myers, knows what it's like to build and rebuild and ebb and flow with a professional sports franchise. Magic Johnson is well known, obviously, for his own sports accomplishments, but also in management and ownership. And these guys all know kind of what the landscape is of this type of stuff. And I think, and honestly, it's something that I don't think we really talk about all that much, but really kind of should be talked about. Josh Harris isn't an 85-year-old owner who's never won the Super Bowl and is trying to get a ring before his time is up, right? Like that. I mean, we don't really talk about it, but it is an influencing factor for some organizations. Hello, Atlanta Falcons. So I think that's all important. Now, I can't tell you if Josh Harris has Dan Quinn on the hot seat. You know what I mean? That's not for me to say, and it's nothing that they're going to say publicly. What I love about the dialogue is like, and I'll say this every once in a while, usually to a fan who wants to get disrespectful in the comments, because I'm gonna match your energy. They'll be like, well, DQ and AP are on the hot seat, so this move better work out. I'll be like, who's hot seat? Your hot seat? Because I got news for you. Your hot seat don't really get that warm in this conversation. Like, Dan Quinn isn't worried about pumpkin snatcher 24/7 on YouTube and their hot seat. So if he's on your hot seat, that's great. Like, it means that you want to see the team be successful. Granted. But you don't know if he's on the hot seat. I don't know if he's on the hot seat. I can tell you this. The last time I talked to Dan Quinn, he certainly looked like a man who was pretty comfortable in his skin. And I've seen some coaches that walk around and they look like they know that their time is maybe wearing thin. Maybe they're starting to take some boxes to their car a little bit early because they know the writing is on the wall. So that's all I can tell you. You know what I mean? That's really all I can give you. What I have said, and I'll reiterate it here, is that if Dan Quinn goes out and hires two first-time coordinators, first-time play callers, that to me is the behavior of a man who knows he's got at least one more year. Now, again, if this thing, if they go 2-15 and all this other stuff and get swept by the New York Giants or, some craziness, like, everything can change, but that's this business. That's every business. I mean, Anthony Armstrong, number one realtor in the greater Texas area, you go 3 months and you don't sell a single house. And I don't even actually know if that's a bad rate because I'm not in real estate. But if you go however long without selling a single house, you might be the greatest thing on real estate business in the real estate business at the end of January. And by the end of April, you're out the door. So, I mean, it's all fluid.
It is a finicky business, man. It's a lot more psychology than they let you on to know. Everybody thinks it's just signs and like nice clothes and closing days. Man, look, people get to telling you your business, Nick. You get to looking at people. You got a tinfoil hat. They're like, oh yeah, man, I am all about the like, okay, didn't know that. We're gonna have to take that down. Please take down your personal effects. Look, when you have this rookie OC in DC, I told you I always lean positive. Give me the silver lining side of things. Here's what I see with this. Dan Quinn and Adam Peters are understanding they are on the leading edge of innovation in the NFL. Why? David Blau has played for and been underneath a lot of really good offensive minds, right? We've already been over that. But then on the flip side, Daronte Jones has been on staffs that have gone against those same offensive and defensive minds. So if David Blau is the creative kid that he is, who's always doodling in his playbook, coming up with new innovative plays, and Dan Quinn lets him go and run those things, Daronte has to figure out how to stop it. So now these guys can actually, kind of play chess, and iron sharpens iron, and we're going to be on the front edge of what the NFL is trying to do. That right there is the benefit. Hell, having a year of not knowing what somebody does, like I mentioned it before, that's how you really ride a wave. The Wildcat rode a wave. That drift concept with the read option and Mike McDaniel and Kyle Shanahan, that rode a wave, and it messed up the whole damn league. If they can develop something like that, where nobody can catch up to it, hey, I'm not going to be mad if they's one and done. Like, shoot, you can be on the hot seat all you want. Go get me a Super Bowl and you can go off on the sunset. I think it's a good idea. It's going to have you nervous. But look, Dan Quinn has seen this guy operate for 2 years. It's not like he just plucked him off the street. It's not like he's been a head coach of a high school football team. And then all of a sudden it's like, I can call plays in the league. And like, no, you haven't been up here. So at least he's been in the process. Daronte's been with Flores, seen how he's done things. And you shared the comment that if Flores would have gotten the head coaching job, Daronte would have been the DC. Mm-hmm. So to think that we've gotten him outside of that cycle, Flores likely said, hey, man, I'm not going to take this lateral leap, but I know a guy who will gladly take this promotion or bring something to you. And then third point, you got to understand, he is from PG County. All the AI says he's from a Washington, D.C. suburb. Like, put respect on it. He is from PG County. He is coming home. All right. He is coming home. He's going to want to put respect on his name. He wants to put respect on his hometown. He's going to perform. And we'll worry about the talent later. But I think the mentality is what sets defense apart. If you have a right mentality, I don't care who you plug and play. You can get somebody who's soft on another team show up, and all of a sudden they're a dog when they get around the right type of people, David. You understand that.
I mean, this man was a PE coach. This man, there is literally human beings walking around this world right now going, Mr. Jones? Like, he threw a dodgeball at me once. Mr. Jones, like, he's in the NFL. Like, he's coaching the Washington Commanders. Like, he's back home doing this. Like, and I think that's something that's great about Daronte that I would think, like, everybody can really appreciate. Like, this man has not been given anything. And listen, I'm never going to be one. Like, I remember, like, Jack Del Rio had his son on the coaching staff, and, like, Ron Rivera had his daughter on the production staff. And, like, I'm never going to honestly, like, if your kid has talent, like, I'm not going to shame you for it, because these men are busy. These coaches, they live a life that does not allow them to spend a lot of time with their family. So if you have the way to better your organization, and that is the key, but to better your organization and also be around your children, I ain't going to hate you for it. But this is not one of those people. Like, this is not a man who grew up because, his dad was in the NFL, got him in the NFL, did all these things. So if you're one of those people that looks down on that type of stuff, you should appreciate this man, because literally, I mean, he had, and, listen, like, there's gonna be a lot more that comes out. Some of these stories are already out there. Like, go look it up, man. Like, this man had football stolen from him. Like, he literally had football taken from him. He was a college athlete, had suffered nerve damage, was told he could never play football again, and, like, went through the depression and the, who am I now? Because I've always been a baller. Like, that's what he went through. Like, I've always been a baller, and now what am I? And what am I going to be? Where, he was lost for a little bit, had to have people come help pick him up. And now he's going through, he's an educator, he's a trainer, he's a teacher, and he's picking other people up. So, when you see the future, Emmanuel Forbes going through the confidence issues and all this stuff, like, I can't tell you that Daronte is going to fix them, but I can tell you that if Daronte can't fix them, it's not going to be from a lack of understanding, empathy, and effort. And I mean, like I said, we don't know what the scheme is going to look like. We don't know what the defense is going to look like, but all we know is who the man is. Like, this is the man coming in for the job. And right now, that's all you can know about him. So that's all you should be rooting for. And if you can't root for this man, I don't know who you can root for then, Nick, honestly.
I see a Aubrey 44 here in the YouTube comments saying DQ is either confident as they're crazy as hell with these coordinator moves, or like it's not obviously just Dan Quinn that's making these hires, but I think there's a level of both. Listen, high risk can also lead to high reward, and there's a chance that you have two of the perfect coordinators for this situation. Listen, David Blau makes you feel that hire makes you feel a little bit more confident because one, he was already in the building. Two, happened very, very quickly. There were a lot more interviews and it was a longer process when it comes to the defensive side of it. Now, I'm not going to say whether or not Daronte Jones was their first choice. I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that he probably wasn't, given all the other people they talked to, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't end up being the right choice here. And, it just goes back to Dan Quinn understands who he is. He understands his role with the organization, and he understands really, like, this is a team that needs a lot of work. And if you have two new minds out here, the one thing that can really help them with two first-time coordinators is nobody on the other side of the field, whoever they play next year, week by week. And I see you smiling, Anthony. Nobody has seen what they do. So there's an advantage there in the sense that you don't know what the offense for David Blau is going to look like. We don't know. The rest of the NFL doesn't know. He hopefully knows. But it's the same thing with the defense. Even once they build this roster up, even once they start adding, God forbid, more pass rushers than they can deal with. Like, once they get to that point, Anthony, there is a level of an advantage there of, at least early in the season, people are not going to know what this offense and defensive schemes are going to look like until there's film. And if these coordinators, obviously, and the rest of the coaching staff are smart enough and they continue to add layers and evolve, it's going to keep other teams guessing week after week.
Yeah, I think the evolution is definitely key, and it will be there. And ultimately we got to have the on-field results. Because right now the coach has to sell this vision, to the defense and say, man, we're going to be doing this and we're going to do this, and you're going to get all hyped and we're going to get after the quarterback, and but they also know that there's a lot of work to do. Right. I mean, the folks that were on the field are like, I played, right? I was on the field last season, and everything that you say sounds good, but, let's get to OTAs and let's work our way through it. But whenever they start cutting up the tape and Daronte's showing the film of what he wants to do, and if he's a teacher, then he's going to show the why, and he's going to explain why we're doing the things that we do. And he'll be able to break down some of the finer nuances and help get the buy-in from players. So I'm looking forward to that kind of growing. The side with David Blau, that's going to be interesting too, just because he's so young. And it is more of like, how influenced is he going to be by players? Is that going to be something? There's a lot of different layers of relationships that are going to happen. But I've said it time and time again. I think DQ, he's going to create an environment where those guys can thrive and feel confident in trying to do different things and evolve. But then I don't think he's going to give them free reign to just, go out there and do what you want to do. But he's going to have some boundaries, and I'm mentioning as his staff gets built out, those are going to be key to see who's able to support what these folks are doing. But with Blau being so young, he probably need a lot more veteran offensive help. With Daronte being a little older, even though he hadn't called plays, he probably knows a few more coaches around the league that he's been around, David, that he'd like to bring in on the staff.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. And I think if I had to, I'm not really nervous about any of it, to be truthfully, but I also don't have any control over, so there's no reason to be nervous about something you don't have any control over, to be honest with you. But David Blau would be the one that I think, would make me more nervous, I suppose. Like if I'm less sure about, the path ahead, it would be more David Blau. But like a lot of people have already mentioned, like we've kind of touched on here as well, talent matters, too. The coaching absolutely matters. The scheme absolutely matters. Putting people in the right place absolutely matters. But the players on the field got to ultimately make the plays. You know what I mean? And Nick, we've seen this before. Just because you call, cover two, and this dude's got deep zone on this side of the field. If he sees something and he thinks he knows better than the average bear, and he decides to shoot something, and now that deep zone is empty, and now somebody's running wide open. Hey, like, you can't really blame the coach for it because the coach didn't teach it that way. But at the end of the day, like, if it happens too many times, we see it. The coach is going to be held responsible, and ultimately that will be what decides whether or not either of these moves or both of these moves are successful or not, and whether or not Dan Quinn is successful.
Right. Coaching can only do so much. It's the talent you still have on the field. It's the old cliche about cooking the dinner but not having the right ingredients. It's the same thing, and it works time and time again. So there's a lot of work to be done now on both sides of the football for them. We'll look at some early free agent targets now that we know what the defense and offense look like from some of the coaching perspective next year on Commander Squad. And there is nothing like being in an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that's not always so simple. And that's why Game Time has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast. Without the hassle, it puts the advantage back where it belongs with the fans. Pulled up the Game Time app just recently, actually. You can look at all upcoming NBA games. These were Wizards games. You may not want to go there, but I'm just saying you have the option that's actually there. You can see all the prices up front. It's all in. It's everything. They don't give you surprises. There's nothing like, oops, we just added a ton of money at checkout. They don't do that to you. Being able to actually see the view from the seat, that's pretty cool too, because it's one thing to look at like an arena, but it's another thing to actually have it right there in front of you and say, this is what my seat's going to look like. They take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. That's code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. And remember, it's Game Time. It's gametime.co, not gametime.com. All right, Anthony Armstrong, David Harrison, and Nick Ashew. This is not an NBA show, but I will say this: there's a lot of NBA trade rumors going around today. I'm kind of juiced up about some.
I heard
of those
Giannis
things going
is
on,
looking for a new team. Can he play corner?
Oh man, let me tell you something. Giannis a corner. Could you imagine what position would Giannis play if he were ever play in the NFL? I feel like you imagine a 6'11" wide receiver. Yeah,
it'd be a one and done. Look, man, it'd be a one and done. Here's the thing, man. I can appreciate NBA athleticism. I really do. I can't dribble. I can't shoot. So I appreciate what they do. They are very rare individuals. But a lot of them are great at basketball because of their experiences with football. All right. He could be out there. We could have Giannis as a wide receiver. But there's going to be one good time he gets hit, Nick. And that's it. That's just going to change his trajectory. He's going to be like, you know what? I'm good. I don't want any part of this game. So if I had to bring an NBA player over, it'd be like a Dylan Brooks. It'd be a Russell Westbrook. It's like those 6'3", 215 pounds that got a little edge to him. I got to see if Dylan Brooks is about it. But Russell Westbrook would make a hell of a safety. I would love to have him at like a strong safety. He could play up near the line of scrimmage, blitz from time to time, but also play in coverage. Player comp, Minkah Fitzpatrick. What do you think, David? He's delayed on us, didn't he?
I think Nikola Jokic would make the perfect chain gang member. Like, and I love that man. I love that man. But put him on a football field. I feel like Giannis would look like a deer running on ice. Like, to be honest, like that's what I invent is like a deer running on ice. I don't think it would look too good, but hey, Giannis finds a good home. And I'm not really a big NBA guy, to be honest with you. So if I know the rumor, it's out there. So I mean, we'll see.
It is everywhere now. I noticed nobody mentioned LeBron playing tight end, so I guess that's a played up thing.
He's too old
Anthony.
now. He's
once again. I mean, like he's obviously taller, he's physical, he's fast. I mean, he was an all-state receiver, but he ain't got hit. You see the way people get hit in the league. That's the part about it. And I had a friend of mine. He was like, "This should be a topic on your podcast." And I was like, "Bro, y'all gonna get hit." And he's like, "Well, if you take away physicality, I think if we take away the physical nature, we're not playing football anymore."
Yeah.
Right? If you want to play flag football or 7-on-7, sure, I'll take the 6'11" and 6'7" and all that all day. And even at that point, I may tell my defense to take a shot at somebody just one time on accident. You know what I mean? Play the ball, play through the ball. That's all it is. Because at some point, like Jeremy Reeves said it, violence will solve everything. There's got to be some level of physicality. That's all. I'm gonna get off my soapbox. I'm out of here.
I see George in the YouTube comments. Giannis and DC. That I would love. Wizards have a lot of young talent on there, but if you get Giannis, you get a chance of a lot of years left. Yeah, maybe not for the Commanders, but there are a lot of names out there in free agency the Commanders could address that are actually football players, though. It's funny, Anthony. You mentioned a name that is somebody that I actually did think about is a Jeff Okudah, who's going to be a free agent. Now he's about to be 27, really hasn't lived up to the expectations and the hype that certainly he had around him when he got drafted in the first round. He's still young enough where you kind of feel like maybe I don't know if reclamation project is the right word, but that's the best one I have right now. So I'll go with it. But like, maybe that's a situation there where some of the free agents they look at, it's not all just going to be about throwing money at big name free agents, because there's a lot of those names that are older that you may not want to commit longer to. But it may also be a Dorrance Armstrong type situation, David, where they're looking and saying, this guy given an opportunity in our system, or this guy getting more snaps, or the coaching that we want to give him, or with this change in his position or his approach, whatever the case is, we see the potential in him and the height that he could go to. And that's some of the moves that they make in free agency too.
You know, the free agency side, they've already, what I'm talking about, the front office and the coaches, they have characteristics and traits they're looking for in players. On the offensive side, AP said they got to get younger, faster, more explosive, players that are dangerous with the ball in their hand. And on the defensive side, DQ says they want people that get their hands on the football. And now that's the one thing that Okudah doesn't have in his career. But when you bring in new defensive staff, everybody, like I said before, wants to bring in their own people. They want to be able to have somebody that at least knows the tempo that this coach operates with, right? It's one thing to come in and coach is like, hey man, we're going full speed everywhere on the field. And then a lot of times players are like, all right, cool, got it. But whenever you see like, hey, I was with coach back in Minnesota, when he means full speed on the field, like he's not playing. So like, y'all go ahead and let's pick up the tempo. He sets the tone. He can help set the tone and let people know kind of how this thing is going to roll. It may give him a chance to jump out there and revitalize his career. He's been on a lot of football teams. And I mean, you can say, hey, Zebra's not going to change his stripes. Sure, that's fine. But hey, that means there's a chance to give him a couple of dollars, a 1-year deal. Let him go out here and try to prove himself. AP already said too, we ain't paying people we don't know. We're not going to give him a lot of money. So he's going to have to prove it. And I'm all about it. Give me a 6'1" corner that's young and that knows this coach. Hey, maybe that second time around, or maybe he has a better way to, communicate to Okudah. He can get something out of him. So I'm all for the upside on it, David. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, no, I mean, listen, Okudah's an Ohio State guy. I still remember when he was asked at the NFL scouting combine about all of the defensive pass interference flags they had thrown against him. And he said, I wasn't called for defensive pass interference in college. And I still remember that moment. And, we'll leave the rest of that to history. But Jeff is always someone who's been intriguing. I talked about Eric Wilson, the Vikings linebacker who, started the 2025 season as one of their weak side linebackers, ended up having to move to Mike because of injury, and did a really good job of orchestrating that defense, and that could be someone who comes in as well, depending on what Bobby Wagner wants to do and how, Coach Jones sees a potential Bobby Wagner, person in his system and all those things. And that's kind of the key, right? Like when you talk about sought after coaching candidates, the important thing is to go to some place that doesn't just give you a job title, right? But they're giving you an opportunity. And if you're going somewhere, people wonder, like, is he just coming in here to run Dan Quinn's defense? And I would be very, very surprised to see a man with the history of Daronte Jones and where he's come from and how he's worked up the chain and where he's worked and done all this stuff. I would be highly surprised to see a man who's gone through everything he's gone through to get here, to take a job, to literally just be handed somebody else's playbook and just go call plays from that playbook. I don't think that's what's going to happen. So from, the defensive pass game coordinator, we already talked about Jason Simmons getting maybe an opportunity somewhere else, all the way down to the 7th round pick that maybe they take for the defense. I think that he's going to have a hand in everything. He's going to have a real opportunity. And because of that, like you said, Anthony, he needs people in the building, whether it's coaches or whether it's veteran players, that can help accelerate the learning curve. And yeah, having, Jeff Okudah might be the 4th corner on the depth chart, but if he can be in the meetings and in the locker room and doing all this stuff, helping that 1, 2, and 3 corner learn and pick up this system even faster, that's worth its weight in that contract. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, give Jeff Okudah, a little bit of incentive, like every 2 interceptions your teammates get, you get another 100,000 or something like that. Like, inspire that teaching a little bit.
Shoot, that's a hell of a deal right there, man. Shoot. Sign me up.
So I'm going to throw a name out to you guys here. And I understand there's baggage and I understand there's a lot of boomer busts, but he does generate a lot of turnovers. And we know that this is what the Daronte Jones defense will certainly want, given what the Vikings have done. Trayvon Diggs. I know there's baggage. I know there's injuries. I know there's a lot of boomer bust. I don't know. Like, again, with all of this, the price is right. And I know they obviously need more than corner. We spend so much time looking at edge rushers, though. I feel like this is another position now, knowing the background of the defensive coordinator that's come in here now. I don't know. And I see your face, David, and that's the response that I was expecting. That's why I threw this name out there. It's just, if the price was right, is it worth it? Is it a complete stay away? I feel like for me, it's one of those, if the price is right and if the contract is maybe shorter term and it's the kind of that fresh start feel, I'm cautious with it, especially given all the other needs that they certainly have, but there's certainly a high level of like turnover potential there, at least from him.
Yeah, no, and there's history there. Like he's worked really effectively in an aggressive, hunt the ball type of a system and all that stuff. I mean, look, I'll kind of take the same stance I have with Brandon Ayuk, like, because when you turn on the tape, if you just look at the tape, if it's Madden, the dude is talented, right? The rating is going to be up there. It's all the other stuff, you know what I mean? It's the injury and the medicals, and it's also the fit in the locker room and all that. Look, DQ and even some people on this commander staff and in this commander's locker room know Trevon Diggs a lot better than I do. So if they say that he can be a fit and he could be effective, then fine. And like you said, if the money is right and the understanding is there, that look, dude, like, you're not walking in here to be coordinated the number one cornerback as soon as you step in the building. Like, we still might go draft a 3rd round corner, and we might go sign this undrafted guy with a lot of potential. We might go get this free agent that you got to compete with. You know what I mean? And oh, by the way, Trey Amos is still in the building, and we see a lot of potential in him as well. Like, there's a lot of conversations that have to be had, but those conversations will be had. And if Dan Quinn specifically, who knows this man, says yes, he's good for what we're gonna do here, then I'm gonna trust that, and we'll see what comes of it.
Man, if you I feel like if I said no to Ayuk, I'd have to say no to Trevon. But I can give you some reasons why it wouldn't necessarily be bad. What was the big issue as to why he got out of Dallas? He wanted to stay home to be around his family. He's from around the area. So I don't know. Maybe it would be worth it. Maybe it would be good to be close to home. But the talent, at the peak, the talent is really, really good. But it's been kind of frustrating over the past couple of years. Really hadn't lived up to what the contract was. He's faced some injuries as well. So that one right there, it'd be a conversation. I think it's kind of one of them hold off on. Let's see what we have already. We got a lot of guys that we want to develop first before we go down that road, Nick. I mean, you kind of picked it. I don't know, man. That got me a little worried, but I don't think so, man. I'm good. David Njoku would work. We could flip it to a tight end. We can get David Njoku.
David Njoku is very interesting.
And listen,
he don't want to leave Cleveland though.
And dude, they need talent all over the place, and tight end is certainly one of those too. Yeah. It's interesting if you look at the tight end position, because Njoku is a name that was linked to them. Was it 2 or 3 years ago where there were rumors they were trying to trade for him? I can't remember how many years ago it was, but it was something along those lines. I mean, they certainly need help at tight end. I know we spent a lot of time on the defense, and rightfully so, but it's not like this offense couldn't use some upgrades in certain areas too. I mean, they need a number 2 receiver. That's if Debo's not there, and I think the price tag and the age and the injury history might be a one and done for Debo, though I actually like what they got out of him given the circumstances this year. But tight end is certainly one. Kyle Pitts is only 25. We know Kyle Pitts and the upside that's there, but he's never really lived up to that expectation. But does he want to stay in Atlanta because Kevin Stefanski is going to be there? You're going to get a different mind with a head coach that's there. There's actually a lot of tight ends that would at least kind of fill that void. And they may not all be like massive needle movers, but there's a lot out there in terms of tight ends with a level of potential that would really, really be important to them. Even a Darren Waller. I mean, we know what Darren Waller's ceiling is. I mean, that's David. That's a big one there. I think from a tight end perspective, they can keep Ben Sinnott and give him more opportunities and still go out and get another veteran, especially with Zach Ertz and his injury that he's dealing with. I mean, I don't know whether he ever plays football again. We don't know at this point. So I think tight end is going to be something in the free agent market they're going to have to look at too.
Yeah, of all the Commanders' expiring contracts, I would say that Zach Ertz is the one that I'm least confident is returning in 2026. And for the Commanders are too old crowd. Nobody's going to shed a tear over that. For the people who love the leadership and the zone ability, to attack the zone ability of Zach Ertz, they're not going to be too happy about that. But don't forget, like, Zach Ertz was contemplating retiring from the NFL because Cliff Kingsbury wasn't coaching anymore in the NFL, and then Cliff returns, Zach returns with him. They have a great run. As of right now, like I said, I know Cliff doesn't have an NFL job. And if he does have an NFL job by the end of this whole cycle, it's not going to be in Washington. So I don't know that Zach is coming back. That being said, a lot of good names. Chigokonkwo was one that I've kind of been talking about since like really like mid-season. It's going to be interesting because obviously Ben Sinnott kind of fills a specific type of role, and I'm not going to go as far as to be like, Cliff was agreed to move on from because he wasn't using Ben Sinnott. But I mean, we talked about it here on the episode. Like, I go back to that video of draft night when Ben Sinnott was selected, and the lack of buy-in and the lack of direction coming out of Cliff Kingsbury about a guy you're about to add to your NFL team and spend valuable draft capital on. I just feel like with David Blau and with Daronte Jones both, like, I think you have to go into this process and say, like, listen, we need dudes who know what they want. We need people who know what it is that they're looking for. And, I think Adam Peters maybe hopefully learned a pretty valuable lesson. Like, if I look at my coordinator and I say, hey, what about, Nick Ashew, safety from Temple? How do you think he fits in your defense? And my defense coordinator looks at me and just goes, I don't know. What do you think? I would probably say, I think we're trading this pick is what I think. And I think maybe you need to dive more into these scouting reports. But that's just a clip. It was a pretty long clip, but it's just one clip. It doesn't tell the whole story. But I think that's really just the key is, like, honestly, man, like, and I know I'm in the minority here, which, welcome to my life. I've always been a minority, but anyway, I don't care if he's 38. I don't care if he's 18. Like, if my coordinator says I can make this dude work and here is why from a place of knowledge and confidence, bring him to the team. Bring him to the team. I don't care.
I like all of that. I like where you're going. I'll go receiver wise though. Here's a name, De'Ami Brown.
Yeah, let's
You bringing my man back? What you think?
Yes.
Man.
Because I can tell you this: when he left, there left a glaring need for deep speed on the offense. Right?
Yeah.
Glaring need for deep speed. The one, the play caller didn't call it. But then two, you didn't really have anybody go downfield and go and get it. There's a couple of guys with some speed that's out there. We got McCaffrey, you got Jalen Lane. They can get down the field, but hadn't shown that consistent. De'Ami was starting to kind of show himself as a deep threat. Would you bring him back? I don't think the price would be crazy high. New play caller may make some sense. Could see himself worked into the system, kind of like Jameson Williams. Now, how he does, David Blau starts to implement some of that stuff right there. Maybe that. What do you think about him, Nick? What do you think about that, Dave?
Jameson Williams, would tell you, if you have that deep threat, oh God, I would love to see. Listen, they need a lot on, even from an offensive perspective here. I think now here's the one thing I will say: you have a couple of young receivers here. Luke McCaffrey was at least showing that he could be used more as a wide receiver, not just a return guy. You were starting to see those flashes before he got hurt. Jalen Lane is somebody that I'd love to see a bigger role for, but you got to earn those roles. And there's not enough heading into next season where you can count on, like, Debo leaves. Clearly, they know they need a real number two, because they wouldn't have traded even just a 5th-round pick for Debo Samuel if they didn't feel that that was the case last year. And if you're going to be looking at a similar roster, and by the way, we remember what they looked like when Terry McLaurin was out. So, like, they're going to have to address the wide receiver position too. There's a lot. I know we've spent a lot of time looking at the defensive side of this thing, but, from the offensive perspective too, they need some more out there besides just Terry McLaurin. And maybe Debo comes back at the right price. I think there's certainly a skill set there where if it's not an overly committed contract, it makes sense. But he's also going to be looking to get his last big deal in the NFL. So I think there's definitely a lot to factor in there. From Nikki Javala, also from The Athletic, the Commanders' defensive staff remains fluid after the hiring of Daronte Jones as defensive coordinator, but the team is looking to bring on someone to oversee the front seven with a focus on improving the pass rush, which, David, I'll tell you this, and we'll come back to this in a second here. It is very, very nice to see that this team at least understands, we got to get some help with the pass rush, clearly. So it is still fluid. We'll look at that report next, and why not maybe dabble in a little early Super Bowl prediction here on Commander Squad. Oh, I love when everything just kind of sits there in front of you, right? Oh, there we go. There we go. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. It is crazy to think we're down to one final NFL Sunday, and it's 2 weeks from now. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure that you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. And whether you're backing the favorite, riding the underdog, or building one last same game parlay. Get those in before it's all done. This is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from the kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, you bet just $5. You get $200 in bonus bets if you win. So make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Anthony Armstrong, David Harrison, and Nick Ashew. I gave you that Nikki Javala report about them clearly needing somebody that's going to come in and address the pass rush and handle the front seven. It's not like you're going out on a limb. It's not like it's one of those things, David, where you look at it and go, oh, I didn't think about that. They need to address the pass rush. But I will say this, it still does go to what we were saying earlier in the show, is that, yeah, they still got some things to figure out with this coaching staff, and it goes beyond the defensive coordinator. It's some of those position coaches that are really going to matter too.
I mean, they all matter. Coaching matters. I think more and more people are starting to understand how important coaching is, but I think to this day, there's still a little bit of a lack of understanding of how important coaching really is. So yeah, that coaching staff is going to change. The focus on the pass rush. I mean, listen, we all knew like edge has got to be, priority number one. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the first thing addressed in this offseason, but it's got to be priority number one. And even though we all know this, and Adam Peters knows that we all know this, and we know that Adam Peters knows that we know all this, I was so surprised at the end of season press conference where he was asked, like, is there a position group on this roster that you feel like you need to address the most or focus, more of your time on? And he kind of hesitated, but then he was like, yeah, the edge. You know what I mean? So like, okay, you don't typically see a GM, or hear GM be that translucent or that transparent about the process. So it should be a little bit refreshing, right? It's frustrating because you also know that means you're coming out of a season where your edge just obviously wasn't even close to good enough. And the edge isn't even just the defensive ends, Anthony. It's everything that just comes off that edge, like what comes off the tackle, what's coming around the offensive line, trying to get after the quarterback, trying to disrupt the backfield, do all these things. And that's more than just one person or even two people. In fact, most defenses, it's about 4 or 5 different people. With this Daronte Jones background, I'm looking forward to seeing if it's going to be a little bit of Quan Martin. Like if he's on the roster, and I don't necessarily think that's a guarantee, but if he is on the roster, can Daronte use Quan better than he's been used really since he entered the NFL? Like the way he was used in Illinois is not the way that he's been used in the NFL. And I think that if Daronte used him more like they used him in Illinois, you'd see a better version of Quan Martin. Mikey Sanders still. We entered the offseason, guys. I mean, I don't know. I've said this at least. I've been pounding the table. Mike Sanders is an outside cornerback. Well, guess what? With Daronte Jones and his history, I might be okay with Mikey moving back inside if it means that he's going to be helping out more in run defense, helping out more blitzing, and doing some replace things where, I mean, listen, it sounds crazy, Anthony, and some of these people are going to yell at me, but if you bring Mikey off the edge on a blitz, you put one of them linebackers out there, drop him off in that hook zone coverage in that curl zone, and you put a safety over top of him in case that linebacker gets burned by that slot receiver before Mikey can get home to the quarterback. I would love to see Mikey rushing the quarterback, 2 or 3 times a game even.
Now, you finding different ways to utilize their skill sets. And every time you talk about Quan Martin, and I just think about what Devin Witherspoon was doing out there in Seattle and the way he kind of is impacting the game, moving around. Would love to see that. But then on the flip side, injury has kind of forced Quan to be put in different positions, right? With Will Harris going down, he had to go and play the high safety, and that really wasn't what he was geared up to do. Ultimately,
and I can tell you that wasn't the plan in preseason.
It wasn't the plan in the preseason. And we talk about AP and them, they don't say much, but when they do, they speak, to certain points, and it's good. It's refreshing, like you said, to hear them at least point it out and say, hey, this is the flawed area, and then we're going to go and make exact changes to fix it. So rather than just sit there and say pie in the sky, like, oh, we just got to get better and get healthy. Like, no. It was a troubling position. And that's a message to the people that are currently in the building. And it lets everybody on the outside of the building too. Like, we're going to address this thing. So either you improve your play, you got to come back healthy, you got to, show it in the OTAs and show it with what coach is going to put out there for you, but also know there's going to be competition. All right. There's nothing to run away from. I mean, you'd be lying to yourself. You're like, oh no, the edge was fine. The pass rate. No, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was subpar, and it was one of the glaring issues of the defense. So if you can't sit there and look in the mirror and look at yourself and say, yeah, this is an issue, then you know what, I can't really trust you. I can't really have you in the building, right? Like we have to be able to agree that when we look on the film, that's just not good enough. Nothing against the players, nothing against the people, but it's just not a good enough performance. So it has to be addressed. I'm glad that they're doing something about it, Nick.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting offseason. It's going to be an offseason that clearly with a lot of money to spend, you got to still spend it the right way. We've seen before with this organization, different people, I understand, but we've seen that narrative where, hey, we got money, let's spend it. And then you spend it and realize these guys that you spent money on doesn't actually work. So this is the type of stuff that this front office is going to have to think about. And clearly, they're not going to be quiet because they know there's pressure. I mean, this is going to be year 3 of Jaden Daniels, which is just crazy to think every time we say it, but you have to take advantage of a quarterback that's on that rookie scale contract because it's not going to be long. Right now, it's Laramie Tunsil's contract is going to be a conversation this offseason. But after your left tackle, it becomes Jaden Daniels in that conversation and where he fits. And obviously, there's a lot that still needs to be done on the field for that to be a legit conversation. But it's coming fast, and that's how the NFL works. So, all right, we are coming back Friday for another episode. Free agency, the draft, a lot of this is the center point of this team. So we got plenty to look at with all of these positions, all of the needs, plus some of the other coaching staff moves that this team is going to continue to make. Anthony Armstrong, David Harrison, Nick Ashew, it's Commander Squad.